Com, the Republican
I
candidate
did
for
not
governor.
have sexual relations
And
with
I
that woman.
realized that this is something
Miss
he
Lewinsky.
is
We're not going to be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Hey, good morning and welcome back to Backfire. Good to have you with us this morning. Thanks for listening. John Stanberry, Franklin Chansey, we're in the building.
Good morning.
We're ready to get started.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, good morning, guys. I know that this might be a toes. We don't want to step on any particular toes or anything, but we've got to talk about this Bebb situation that's hitting the headlines in the Banner and hitting the headlines in the Chattanooga Times. You know, Mr. Bebb, when August comes, it probably won't be soon enough this year. I'm going to make some statements here. I'm probably going to be sorry I did, but we don't need this chaos, and it's time to move on. Anyway, there's an article in the Banner, Bebb assault charge called Just Politics, and then today in the Chattanooga Times, my Times disappeared. Anyway, it's got another headline here that says fired attorney reinstated by Bebb. So
that's amazing. If it was just politics,
I know it, but it's even hard for me to follow. So let's talk about it a little bit and see if we can just get our audience up to par on what's going on here. Franklin, you want to start? What's going on with Bebb?
Well, I don't know exactly what's going on. It's certainly a
disturbing,
ugly scenario. The allegation is, and I'm going to preface this by saying this is really uncomfortable for me because I've considered both of these individuals to be friends. One of them's a Democrat and one's a Republican, by the way.
Who?
Sidney Schumer.
I was trying to figure out who was the
So
Republican.
it's not a partisan or a political thing.
No, it's a decency thing, and it's a propriety thing.
So you know, it's not real seemly for me to be jumping in the middle of that fracas between those two people who I consider to be friends.
Mm-hmm.
The allegation is that
I guess what I'm trying to do is just understand what they're writing about here.
Well, the allegation is that General Bebb was
Yelling and screaming at a female employee who was 8.5 months pregnant, who was at the time sobbing and crying,
and that Miss
and pounding his
Miss
fist on the
Schimmel
desk.
went to
Rescue her
in some way, and that ultimately led to her being terminated and allegedly having been grabbed by the arm.
Well, let's don't gloss over. When she tried to protect the sobbing 8.5-month pregnant woman who has had 2 miscarriages before, as I understand it, at the request of the other female employees of the office. She was grabbed, drugged down the hall while she said, "Let go of me, take your hands off of me," at which point a fist was doubled up, cocked back. Apparently, somehow, composure was regained and she was not struck with that fist. He was not in the office the next day, which was Thursday. On Friday morning, he walked in, said, "I need to talk to you," walked in her office and said, "You're fired." Now, in the firing, apparently, he told her that she was a good attorney and that he was upset with having been stabbed in the back, that she wasn't supporting a former employee of the office.
and I'm going to say it. I'm going to come out and say it. It's Hatchett that worked in that office that Bebb is wanting to.
Well, he's endorsed him, and he's apparently campaigned. The Free Press has alleged he's campaigned while on government time for him, and we know that he sent a letter to the district attorney's conference on the district attorney conference letterhead saying, "I plan to work between now and August 31st to see to it that Stephen Hatchett is elected," which a lot of people, and I know I'll catch flack for bringing up the Hatch Act, a lot of people feel that's a violation of the Hatch Act because he used taxpayer-funded resources for political purposes.
Well, you know,
but that's getting away.
It's getting away. That's getting away from what's happened here. I mean, this is something that should not happen in a professional office. Shouldn't happen anywhere where a boss makes a fist and throws a threat towards a female employee. It's just terrible. It's bad. Mr. Bebb, it's time to retire, go away.
Well, the worst, to be honest, the thing that's worse about this.
Now, if I get picked up tonight and arrested, I'm going to be raising Cain, too.
The thing that's really worse about this is after this all broke, and this was all news to really everybody, that wasn't in the office at the time, although there were apparently two witnesses. Calvin Rockholtz, who is the investigator for the office, witnessed part of it, and Richard Fisher, long-time DA, witnessed part of it. So there are witnesses to this. But after all of this broke, Mr. Hatchett issued a press release where he not only defended Bebb, he attacked the victim. And what's really interesting for someone running for district attorney, he said the person that's accused is entitled to the presumption of innocence. He then launched into about a 3-paragraph attack on the victim. Said she was a bad attorney. There were plenty of reasons for her to be fired. Now, is that really the tone you want a district attorney to take, to attack the victim?
Anyway, it's a bad situation. It keeps coming up in the headlines. There's so much been going on in this office for the last few years.
Except, of course, for actually putting criminals in jail.
Yeah. Anyway, it's time for change. The change needs to happen.
Well, if you like the idea that if you're a friend of the district attorney, you'll be protected, and you're an enemy of the district attorney, you'll be prosecuted or persecuted, then don't vote for Steve Crump. Vote for Mr. Bebb's chosen candidate, Steve Hatchett. That's who Bebb wants to continue his legacy.
Well, anyway.
Folks, this will get me in trouble, but make sure you read the Free Press and the Banner, because the Banner, their headline was out of one of the candidates, Mr. Hatchett's press release. That was the huge headline they put on top. And while that press release attacked Steve Crump, his opponent, they didn't even bother to call Steve Crump for a reply.
All right, what else would y'all like to talk about this morning?
Well, I am curious what John's position is on the open carry bill that passed through the Tennessee State Senate yesterday.
Oh, I bet John's excited.
It's the bill as I understand it, and I haven't read the actual bill. I've only read news accounts of it. Is that if it's legal for you to purchase a gun, that you would be permitted to carry it openly anywhere it's not otherwise prohibited by law. In that you don't have to have any kind of training or a permit or anything like that. You don't have to have a permit if you want to carry it concealed. Is that an accurate statement?
It's probably, a lot of states have open carry. Arizona and some of the western states for years have had open carry. My only problem with open carry is it only protects the person that's carrying the firearm. Mm-hmm. The whole point of concealed carry is that a crook doesn't know who has one and who doesn't. So there's actually a broader benefit to society with the concealed carry. So as long as you have concealed carry and the criminal element knows that anybody could have one, I don't have a problem with open carry. Now, I grew up hunting. And when we were deer hunting, I always carried a pistol on a shoulder holster. Shoulder holsters relatively difficult to take off. So when I was, 18 years old, I'm stopping at 11 o'clock at the convenience store after coming out of the woods, and I've got a .357 Magnum strapped to me. I don't have a problem with that. I'm a law-abiding citizen. The guy that you don't know has a gun. You think the criminal walks in with the gun strapped to his side? Of course not.
From my perspective, it's not really the law-abiding citizen typically, or even the criminal, that concerns me in this scenario. What bothers me is the two parents who get into it at a Little League baseball game over something that happened with their kids. We see people act irrationally all the time, and those things can escalate. And if those people have firearms that readily available to them in such a quantity, I just foresee problems.
Well, here's the problem with that, and that's what the liberals always do. They go to the emotional outlier incident. The problem is those haven't happened. They haven't happened anywhere in the country. Everywhere where we've passed these laws.
I'm sure there was one case somewhere.
Well, there may be one here or there, but you know what? What about the cases where the moms drove their cars into the river or the ocean and drowned their children? I guess we ought to ban cars because a car has been used to do a nefarious act at some point in the past. You know, the problem here, let me give you an example of what the gun control people consider common sense ways to deal with gun violence, because our Attorney General, Eric Holder, testified before Congress on Friday, and he had one of these common sense solutions. This is his common sense solution. All gun owners should wear electronic ID bracelets. By all means, make sure you can track us. And while we're at it, why don't we just make all the Jewish people wear a Star of David, sewn onto their clothes, like the Nazis did?
Well, we haven't had the ability to go around carrying firearms openly on our persons.
Actually,
like
the
that
birth of this nation was based on
over
people
the last 50 years.
And you know
so
what,
this is
Franklin?
not
Somehow
gun
we
control
built the
we're talking
greatest
about.
nation
We're
in the
talking
world.
about expanding this access
we're talking about
more
going
so.
back to common sense. We built the greatest nation in the world with people carrying guns.
I don't remember there being a problem in the 50s.
There
or
wasn't
the
a
60s
problem
with people not carrying
There
guns
wasn't a
around
problem from
all the time, like it's the
1776
Old
all the
West.
way up to 1950. There wasn't a problem then either. It wasn't until the liberals decided they knew best for the rest of us. Now, by the way, the liberals, when we talk about that, Dianne Feinstein, good liberal from California, extremely supportive of gun control measures. None of us, just like Franklin, we just don't need to have these kind of guns, especially an assault rifle, right? Guess what? She's one of the few California citizens with a permit to own an assault rifle. So what's good for her apparently is not good for the rest of us.
Going back to Tennessee open carry, I'm going back to a question Franklin asked. Basically, an open carry, you don't have to have any kind of permit or any kind of training.
there's no training attached to this, no permit.
I mean, why do they have that for a closed and then nothing for an open?
Because if you're open carry, then everybody sees you have the gun, and more than likely, I will tell you, very few people will open carry because police officers are going to go over to them and they're going to go, "What are you doing? Who are you? Why are you here?" And so the reason they do the concealed carry with the training is because nobody knows you've got it. So if you're going to be legal in hiding it, we want to make sure you know what you're doing. If you're open carrying, it's basically an open secret, and police officers can investigate.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I promise you that police officers in general will not like this legislation. They'll be opposed to it.
Well, Franklin, why would you be opposed to it? I know who's got a gun. I got two eyes. I can see him coming. It's the guy you can't see coming that's the problem.
Well, I mean, I can see if a guy walked into a convenience store packing a pistol and pulls it out and pops it up to the head of somebody and says, "Give me the money." All right. That would probably, typically he has to hide that gun, come in and do it now. Now he can just walk in with it. And
He can walk in with it anyway, Steve.
Oh, I know. But what I'm trying to get at is it's going to be very open point.
Well, put it this way: when I hunted, I've got a pair of hunting pants that I've worn since I was a teenager. They've never been washed. Now that's a problem for my wife.
The size and everything's the same.
Well, they were pretty big when I started with it.
Apparently, you haven't hit any animals, or there'd be some blood or something.
No, there's lots of blood. I can identify the blood stains on it. That's my Uncle Ted's, bobcat blood. But my point is, I look relatively rough when we're out hunting. We don't take care of our hunting clothes. They're torn up, they're muddy, they're dirty. So I'm sure when I walk in with a pistol strapped to me, the guy probably behind the counter reaches under, puts his hand on his whatever he's got under there, shotgun or baseball bat, and that's fine. I understand that. Now, I will tell you, that's one of the reasons I didn't do it very often. I was uncomfortable doing it. But there are times when I needed to get in there. I didn't have time to take everything off. That's what this bill's about. It's about common sense. It's about law-abiding citizens aren't going to rob you in the first place. It's the criminal that's robbing people.
What John discounts is the idea that people have bad days. It's not that they're fundamentally bad or evil.
Do you think people had bad days in 1859?
I'm sure there were some.
Well, we didn't need an overpowering government to regulate gun ownership back then, and we were able to build the greatest nation. We did not, actually. Most of the accounts that the fancy elite liberals in New York City read about in the paper were all fabrications. The West, by and large, was a pretty lawful area. Most of those accounts were completely fictitious. We have a poor idea of how the West actually functioned. And Franklin, we built the greatest nation in the world based on this kind of freedom.
Real quick, I'm going to talk about Volkswagen's unions getting stirred back up again. They're trying to.
They're sore losers, and they're going to try and cram it down our throat.
Now they're going to try to, from what I understand, they're pushing that the card system that they had originally deal. That basically they're pushing Volkswagen to
In other
go
words,
along
they
with
lost
that.
their election, so now they're going to fall back on the cards, which they
the
intimidated.
Actually, the article said that VW was the one who may be pushing
VW
it,
is
not the
controlled
UAW.
is controlled half by business people and half by union people, and it's the union people that are driving this. They are trying to save their brethren in the UAW in America, and that's all this is about.
Anyway,
You know what? If you look at Passat sales, they ought to be focusing on the cars.
Are they going down?
They're down. You know, the industry went up and Passat sales went down, and I don't want that at all. But my point is, this is a distraction from their business, which is the problem with the union to begin with. The unions are never focused on actually growing the business, which would in turn allow everybody to win.
Well, this morning in the Chattanooga Times, again, the Chattanooga Police and Fire retired officers and firefighters filed a class action lawsuit suing over a decision to eliminate an annual 3% cost of living increase to an average 1.5% increase. Now, this was part of the new plan that the mayor of Chattanooga has put together there to try to save money in the future because Chattanooga is going broke. What's your opinion of two things, class action lawsuits and the union trying to come back in to stop a correction here?
Class action lawsuits are like any other tool in the law. They can be used well or abused. So you get class action lawsuits alleging that some company, had some practice that charged 3 million customers 8 cents extra a piece. That's probably an abuse. You got
The lawyer's going to make a lot of money off that.
You got a class action lawsuit where where 10,000 people got exposed to a terrible chemical on their job because the regulations that were supposed to apply weren't followed by the employer. It's probably a good thing because there's no way to
Methamphetamine, whatever that is.
Well, the problem is but the real problem was the one out Pacific Gas and Electric, which you had Aaron Brockovich. That actually turned out to be a completely bogus claim. The cancer rates were no higher than any other people in California, and yet her law firm made a lot of money off that. Franklin's right. It can be used for these ads are so disgusting. And as someone in the medical field, what's really disgusting to me is, do you really think that we can look 40, 50, 60, 80 years down the road and anticipate every single complication from a new drug? So the point sort of is, how long do you want them to test these drugs, folks? And if you sue them out of business, they'll quit developing new drugs.
The question is whether they have evidence of the problem existing early on.
The lawsuits put Dow Corning out of business over the silicone breast implants. They have now, it's a $400 billion business. People lost their jobs. They now know that there was absolutely nothing to that. And they're now allowing silicone breast implants again. So you had, thousands of people and billions of dollars lost over a lawsuit that was basically bogus. People's lives were destroyed over that.
Well, there's a lot of class action lawsuits that are basically bogus. They're just
Franklin's right. There are good uses and there are bad uses. Now, I will say on this pension thing, I'm really torn on this for two reasons. I think the unions are never focused on the big picture. They're very selfish organizations, and so they go in and they really aggressively push for these benefits. Now, the real problem is the politicians who, in order to get a vote, agree to it. And so these pensions that they've been given and these raises they've been given are out of line. They're probably unsustainable, and Mayor Burke probably has to do this. But having said that, by God, they got an agreement. They were given this by stupid politicians, and so it has been promised to them. And I don't like people going back on their promises. So it's a real rock and a hard place.
Well, you do it and stick to it. That's the way.
My point is, you shouldn't have done it in the first place.
That's right. I agree with you. Anyway, they've got to stop doing something to curb some of these benefits. There's no doubt about it. You just can't keep giving things
Well,
away.
the only way
somebody can retire at 50 years old and get benefits and all this
well,
stuff.
3% raise. Nobody in the private sector who runs their own business has got a 3% raise the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. The economy's been horrible.
Oh, I know.
We're not getting a 3% raise.
I know.
Now, there is one way to settle this, though. If the mayor truly believes that this payment will bankrupt the city, President Obama could step in and set it aside, give the money to the union anyway, and just force all the taxpayers in Chattanooga to pay for it like he did at GM.
Speaking about GM, you talk about lawsuits, class action
There's an
lawsuits.
example that where it will probably be appropriate. Although the good news is, while GM's conduct is reprehensible in this case and they should be held accountable, the good news is the number of people actually injured is not that great from what I've seen, and so it probably won't get to that huge level.
I'm looking at lawmakers accuse General Motors of possible criminal cover-up.
Yeah, I think that's entirely possible.
Gee, I wonder why all the government regulators who've been running the company for the last 3 or 4 years didn't find that earlier.
They knew it. Anyway,
Government Motors.
Government Motors, that's right.
But I'm sure we'll find somebody to blame.
Eric Holder, who was the congressman that he got into it with the other day?
I think it's Louis Gohmert from Texas. He's been real big on the Fast and Furious debacle.
Anyway, I watched just a portion of this, and Holder came off on him and told him, "You better watch it, buddy. Don't go there. Don't
He's
go
the
there."
Attorney General of the United States. You can't talk to him like that.
And Congressman, I was proud of him. He came right back. He said, basically, give us
what we asked for.
Yeah.
Release the actual information that we've asked for in investigating the death of hundreds of people.
Holder's not going to do it, is he?
No, he won't do it. And the media, the elite liberal media, will not put enough pressure on him to do it. Here's the disgusting part about this. We talk about Watergate. Guess who forced the issue on Watergate? Howard Baker and Fred Thompson. The Republicans forced Watergate, even though it was a Republican president. Where are the decent, fair-minded Democrats saying this is wrong? This attorney general is wrong. The hiding, the refusing to release documents is wrong, and we won't stand for it anymore.
We're going to have a Democrat say it right here, right now. Franklin, will you say it?
Say what?
John, repeat what you just said.
He knows what I said.
No, actually, I was reading an article about the story you were talking about because I hadn't heard about this.
He's a decent Democrat. Where is decent Democrat?
It was the Republicans, Howard Baker and Fred Thompson, that forced Watergate. Fred Thompson's the man who said, what did the president know and when did he know it? It was the Republicans questioning a Republican president that really brought that to the issue. Where are the good, decent Democrats saying, Mr. Attorney General, answer the questions, release the documents, give us the information we've requested?
And I told John that he was going to hear from one this morning. Now, Franklin, here's your opportunity. Would you like Eric Holder to release this information?
If it does not apply to an ongoing criminal prosecution, the answer is yes.
Well, there's no criminal prosecution.
I don't know the answer to that question, John. That's the answer to your question, though.
That's a dancing around.
It's not a dancing around.
Yes, it is, and you know it. It's been 4 years now. You got hundreds of Mexicans have died at the hands of these guns that they allowed to walk. You've got 2, maybe more U.S. agents have died. And we have no information on who actually knew, who allowed it, and who may have covered it up.
All right. Franklin, I've got another question for you.
I feel certain you do.
Would you offer immunity to Lois Lerner for a full testimony?
Not likely, no.
Let me ask you why you would not, if you're trying to get to the bottom of something.
Well, her attorney has already indicated she's not going to testify.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say.
So,
if she was offered immunity, she might testify.
That's a prosecutorial decision that prosecutors make every day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe they think that, maybe they don't. It depends on whether you think you can get the information you need from other people.
Would you
For example, documents in this case, those are not subject to a Fifth Amendment privilege. Those are things that they can
But
get.
we just discussed the Attorney General has been asked for 4 years for
Yeah.
documents in another scandal, and he won't release them.
Well, it depends. Are you talking
this
about
is the
a
most
congressional
lawless.
investigation?
This is the most lawless investigation.
Are you talking about a congressional investigation
Franklin,
or a
the problem
prosecution?
is this Attorney General is investigating himself. He himself was accused of impropriety, and he investigated himself. Nobody in their right mind would think that was appropriate, except this administration and apparently the New York Times and the liberal elite media.
But my question, let's say it's a congressional deal.
Then you're going to make a political determination here, because that's really what we're talking about.
Franklin, was Watergate a political investigation? Was it a congressional investigation?
Of course it was.
And what did it lead to?
Did they give immunity?
Here and there, but they had cooperation. They forced, and who was it forcing it? It was Howard Baker, and it was the Republicans forcing it.
There was a prosecutor.
It was Republicans forcing it. It wasn't the Democrats. It was the party who was actually the president's party that forced it. There are no decent Democrats in the House and the Senate who are demanding fairness and truth.
But Lois Lerner, I want to get back. Let's say you are in Congress, okay, and you're part of this investigation.
Okay.
And you want to get to the bottom of it. Every time the key witness here keeps saying that she's taking the fifth.
Okay.
She doesn't want to talk about it.
Okay.
Why would she not want to talk about it unless she was part of something?
That's not really true.
Well, no.
Because
why won't she talk?
When you're the subject of an investigation like that, there's enormous cost to you in terms of money, time, your public reputation, all sorts of reasons for that.
And you don't think she suffered that?
You don't necessarily want to become the target of a political witch hunt, if that's what it is.
But Franklin, if you did nothing wrong, you wouldn't be. You'd turn over you'd answer the questions they ask, and you'd be done.
Well, that's a very charmingly naive look at the way Washington works.
Well, Franklin, we know she's lied right off the bat. She said it was a Cincinnati, two workers in Cincinnati. We have emails going back to her and going to the White House.
Look, you don't need any Democrats to extend her immunity if that's what you want to do.
Well, the problem is
do it.
The problem is twofold. A, she may be the main culprit, and so you're going to extend immunity to her.
I'm not telling you to extend immunity. He
but
asked
if
me
we
the
had
question.
anybody above her cooperating, we wouldn't have to extend immunity to her. If you had anybody with any decency in the Justice Department, they would be pushing her. They're not pushing her. They're defending her. They let her retire and gave her benefits. They didn't even punish her.
So where I'm going with this is we're at a point with Lois Lerner. I think everybody's about had it with her. And
Okay.
I think that she needs to either be offered
send her to
immunity.
jail.
Well, I think she either needs to be offered immunity, and let's get it out of her, what's happened here, one way or another, or we need to go ahead and file charges against her.
Well, the problem is right now the charges would be contempt of Congress.
Okay.
You know what? The problem here, Franklin, is where are the wheels of justice? There's a new report out right now that none of the progressive groups that were supposedly targeted as well were actually targeted. They were targeted for specific minor infractions of their applications, and as soon as that was corrected, they were approved. We have IRS testimony that not a single progressive group was targeted and held up for approval based on their ideology. Only conservative groups were targeted based on their ideology.
Well, there is evidence to the contrary.
No, there's not, Franklin.
There is.
You want to hear that? I'll be glad to read it to you. Acorn groups were scrutinized because the agency thought they were old organizations applying as new ones. Emerge America was scrutinized for potential, quote, improper private benefit. Nothing about what do you believe in? Who are your members? What kind of organizations do you belong to? Do you belong to the NRA? Those were the questions that were asked of the conservative groups.
It's time to file charges against her.
Okay.
It needs to happen. What are they waiting on?
You know. I have a different perspective than John. I just assume that happened because that process is a lot less political.
Well, the problem is, it would be. I'm like John. The problem is, why can't we get any help from above in these type of situations?
Why isn't Eric Holder pushing her?
Eric Holder has no ability to make her testify. He doesn't have that ability.
He has the ability to turn over documents. We still haven't gotten all the documents on it. We can't even get all of her emails. We've gotten a few sparse ones here and there. We can't even get some of the people to be allowed to come testify. In the Benghazi affair, they locked all of the surviving people, the witnesses, away for months and then threatened them and told them if they did come and testify, they would be penalized. That's the kind of actions
we
Eric
didn't
Holder
really
takes.
talk about it last week, but the actual person in the CIA who wrote the infamous talking points testified in Congress yesterday, answered all their questions, not yesterday, last week, answered all their questions. Longtime CIA employee over multiple administrations, was actually with George W. Bush when 9/11 happened. A really well-respected person. And he said the idea that this was changed to help the president politically was ridiculous.
He can't tell why it was changed.
And he's not a Democrat.
The men
by
on the
way.
ground said, we told them from the moment it happened that it was a terrorist attack, and nobody can yet tell why it was changed.
What he also said was that inside the agency, the word they use for what we call terrorists is the word extremists. And that's what appeared in the talking points. That's the language
That's
they
not
use.
what the people on the ground, that's not what the section chief said. He said it's a terrorist attack. He used the word terrorist. You got a guy on the ground looking at it, and he says one thing.
The person who wrote the darn document
for the
testified,
president. The person who wrote it for the president. Yes, he did, Franklin. The whole thing is a mess, and you know
John,
it.
here's the problem. You love these myths, but you don't care when the facts
Franklin,
destroy the myth.
What fact? You mean the guy on the ground who says, I'm looking at it, it's
No.
a terrorist attack? That
Nobody's
fact?
saying that didn't happen, John.
Yes,
but
they
here-
did.
No, but you guys are screaming
Susan
about
Rice
the
went
talking
out and
points.
said it was not a terrorist attack.
And she got the talking points. She didn't talk to the guy on the ground.
Who gave her the
why
talking
not?
points?
The CIA and the State Department.
By the
did.
way, if the president hadn't jetted off to a fundraiser, maybe he could have talked to the man on the ground.
All right. All these big, wild, elaborate stories you guys came up with, every one of them proved to be false.
Except for the four
Every
people
one
that
of
were
them.
murdered by terrorists.
Which is what we ought to be looking at instead of this stupid political witch hunt
You
you've
can't
gone
look
on.
at it, Franklin, because they won't tell
Because
us.
you aren't interested
Franklin,
in it.
Because
you
they
don't
won't,
care
Franklin,
about those people,
because
John.
they won't tell us that, by the way,
You
we
don't
were shipping
care about
arms.
those people.
By the way, we were
All
shipping.
you care about is scoring political points,
Franklin,
and that's what's
the
wrong
only
with this
political
investigation.
points here was the president being reelected.
You don't care
Why didn't he
about
say,
the dead people.
Franklin, why didn't he say we're shipping arms into the Syrian rebels? Why was he lying about that during a political campaign? Why didn't he just admit that's why the CIA was even there?
If he was doing that, John,
Which he
that's
was.
exactly what the Republicans were arguing for him to do.
Then why didn't he
But
honestly
you would
admit
find
it?
something wrong with that
Why
because
didn't he
all
admit
you
it?
care about is skewering the
No,
president.
what we
All
care
right,
about
all
is
right,
that
all
right.
Al
No credibility on
Al
this.
Qaeda
All right.
was alive and well, and he didn't want us to know it.
It's
Hey.
the grand old hypocrite party, day after day after day.
You know what,
When the
Franklin?
president does what you ask him to do, that's a mistake. When he does what you don't ask him to do, that's a mistake.
Well, you know what,
because you
Franklin?
don't care
right,
about
let
the
me-
policy. You don't care what happened to those people.
He has
on the
no
ground.
policy except
you only
himself.
care about getting the president.
Franklin,
just admit it.
let me
you
agree
get up
with
in
you.
the
Let
morning
me-
wanting to
Let
get
me-
the president.
Let me agree with you on something.
I
You're-
love our president if he'd tell the truth.
Let me agree with you on something, Franklin.
If he'd do something.
Something you just said, I do agree with. This president is able to be wrong no matter what he does. Thank you.
All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center.